And Vanya and Annie go on this kind of pseudo romance week. They pseudo fall in love, go to Vegas, get married, and then the shit hits the fan.
Not a cozy watch for anyone who's looking for a cozy watch.
No, not a cozy watch.
No. We recorded before the Oscars.
I'm going to see Captain America today.
I'm going Monday, but I'm jealous.
I've heard middling things. But it couldn't be as bad as Ant-Man Quantumania.
No, I know there's a reason Bob Iger pushed it this year rather than last year, but that's a whole different thing. All right, well, let's kick it off. So you're seeing Captain America today. By the time this comes out, it will have been out for a couple weeks, but let's talk about what else you've been watching.
Yeah, so on Twitter, I saw just so much buzz around Anora.
Yeah.
Which has gotten a lot of Oscars buzz. I guess it has won like some best pictures at festivals. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, it's time for me to give this a watch. I remember you recommended it to me probably a couple months ago that I go watch this. So I watched it. What can I say? It's a kind of a Cinderella-esque story where you've got a girl who's a dancer, a stripper. And that first opening scene is kind of eye-opening, where it's following her throughout a night at the club as she sweet talks men into giving them her money and then just dances for them and stuff. And having never been to a strip club in my life, I'm like, are those men really sitting right next to each other while they're getting danced on? Like, I don't know if I could do that. I'd probably pay out for the private room. Yeah. Anyways, so you get the plot basically is the owner of the club finds Annie or Anora, and is like, hey, we need someone who speaks Russian. We have some Russian customers in here and show them a good time. And she's like, fine. And so she goes and shows them a good time, all the stuff. Turns out this kid that she is there to entertain is the son of some Russian oligarch. And he just throws money around like he doesn't even understand its value, which he doesn't. Spoiler alert. He doesn't understand the value of his money. And long story short, his name is Ivan, or Vanya is what his nickname. And Vanya and Annie go on this kind of pseudo romance like week where he's like, hey, I will pay you X amount of dollars to be my girlfriend for the week before I go back to Russia. And she's like, okay. And because, $15,000 for people like us on the street is not nothing. Like that's really good money. But for, oligarchs who trade in, billions, that's pump change to them. Right. Anyway, so that happens. She spends a week with him. They pseudo fall in love, go to Vegas, get married, and then the shit hits the fan. Yeah, I would say I was expecting the movie kind of take this turn, right? But boy, it was stressful. I've heard this compared to Uncut Gems, with Adam Sandler, and I would also compare it to The Bear in just terms of genuine stress on screen.
Yeah.
So the moment that it happened for me, where I was like, oh, this is more stressful than I bargained for, was the family finds out that he got married to this girl in Vegas. And they're like, no, you can't do that. That's bad for everyone involved for whatever reason, for honor and shame, because she's a sex worker. And then the family fixer, who's some Russian Orthodox priest, sends two Russian goons who, I think the movie does a really good job of this. We're trained as an audience to see Russian hired hands as just cannon fodder. They're just there to be goons, to be dumb, and to just what they're told. But this movie does a really good job of kind of subverting that and being like, no, these are just guys who are unfortunately burdened with this task today, and they actually want nothing to do with this. So they go to Vanya's mansion that he lives in New York and have to tell Vanya that he can't be married to this girl. They want to take him to the courthouse to get it annulled. And then a lot of yelling, a lot of swearing, and then Vanya runs away. He just literally runs out the house. And then for poor Anora, she has to be there to deal with these Russian goons. And that is one of the most stressful, 20, 30 minutes of movies that I've seen.
Yeah. She deals with them.
Kind of. It's just a lot of yelling over each other, a lot of breaking things in a house. And It's just so stressful because that's not who I am, you know? And then it's basically a Where's Roger Rabbit sort of movie from there, where they have to trace down Vanya in New York. And it's kind of a comedy of errors because at the beginning, Annie's kind of set against these Russian goons, but then over the course of the night, everyone just gets exhausted and tired of searching for this dumbass kid.
Yeah.
And not that Annie is willing to play ball with them, because she certainly isn't necessarily willing to play ball with them, but she's ready to just be done with the whole situation. And I think they did a really good job of characterizing these like Russian goon characters to make them really human, which, like I said, we're trained to see the Russian goon, Russian mafia guys as just dumb cannon fodder for our characters to beat on. But they do a really good job of characterizing these goons, and they are goons. And then over the course, you really start to see that Annie believed that this was something more than what it was, which is heartbreaking because she thought that she had a chance to escape a life of poverty. And she was really just some kid's plaything for a week and who never really intended to live a life with her or any of that. And then you have some looking at yourself in the mirror moments when his parents finally fly in from Russia to deal with it and get it sorted. The ending is pretty sober and somber and ends on a scene that between her and one of the Russian goons that honestly I don't know how to feel about.
Yeah, that's the one that's been all over the news in discussion right now. So
Mm-hmm.
that goon in the movie is named Igor,
Yeah.
played by a Russian actor, Yura Borisov.
Who, by the way, I should say, has just kindness in his eyes. He looks so kind.
Looks so kind. Also, just does a great job playing the character. But it's one of those moments where I'm like, ooh, I hope he takes off elsewhere and other people cast him so he's
Absolutely.
not just
Yeah.
the Russian goon because he's got some
Mm-hmm.
believability about whatever he's doing. So here's what the culture issue came in. So Mikey Madison as Anora and Yura Borisov as Igor, for that final scene, they were asked, "Do you want an intimacy coordinator to help you for the scene?" And the two of them go, "No, we got it." Now, in this day and age, and especially whether you talk about it being the Christian right snapback or Gen Z and Gen Alpha just being absolutely anti sex, it has created a pretty big conversation about how bad this is and how terrible and how wrong and how old fashioned it is. And at the same time, it's like Mikey Madison is young. Yura Borisov seems to be, I don't know, 30s perhaps. They can make their own decisions. I understand, and we're going to have an intimacy coordinator on the show at some point to talk about why it's so important.
Mm-hmm.
But it is hard when your two actors are the ones making the decision not to have it. But it blew up. So yeah, so Variety had a really fantastic article back in December about how Mikey Madison declined intimacy coordinator on Anora, but professionals say there should always be one. Actors and directors can't speak for how every extra felt. So there's all these questions around. Does there always need to be one on set? Many say yes. The actors right here said no. But also you do have extras and other people there. It just speaks to the oddity that we still have in film of like, if you're filming an intimate scene, some directors, as far as I've heard, some directors will like clear the set. You got to have
Mm-hmm.
one sound person or whatever. You got to have your AD, your assistant director. You got to have your camera folks, a grip, a light, a PA, and that's it. Like
Yeah.
minimal cast watching what's happening. Where it sounds like on others, and perhaps on this one, extras are watching this, and other people where Mikey Madison's Anora is on top of Igor, right?
Mm-hmm. So basically, the entire day that these people are together, like Igor doesn't want to be there. He's just
Yeah.
there doing a favor to his Russian bosses. And you can tell that he comes from the same place Honora does. This guy, he's like, oh, I live with my grandma. And she's like, yeah, I bet you do. But no, he actually does. And he
Mhm.
comes from the same world that Honora does. And over the course of the evening of looking for Yvonne, I think that kind of reveals itself in their dynamic between Honora and Igor. At first, they start off as real antagonists to each other.
Yeah.
And then I would struggle to say that they end as allies because I don't think that that's what's happened. But over the course, you really start to see that Igor is there because he had to be there, and he actually like is on Nora's side in all of
Yeah.
this. On the plane back from Vegas, like he offers her a drink, and then he stays with her in the mansion that last night and smokes weed with her, and doesn't take much of her bullshit from him. And then in the morning, he drops her off at her house and they're just sitting there in the car. And he hands her back the engagement ring that he had taken from the other Russian guy, which is maybe worth 100 grand or something like that. So it was kind of like Igor saying, hey, I know you got chewed up by this experience. Here's something that hopefully can make it better, is, this ring that I got back for you. And then she's like, oh, I think I misunderstood you. And then, but it's a lot of like enemies to lovers kind of thing, which I don't, honestly, as a trope, I don't love. I think that's a really problematic trope for a lot of reasons, but she like softens towards him, and then she's about to get out of the car, but then she shuts the door, crawls over on top of him, and you're like, what's happening? And he just kind of like, he puts the seat back and then lets this happen. And then they start having some kind of sex, right? And then he puts his hand up over her neck to bring her in to try and kiss her. And then she's pulling away. And then she freaks out, smacks him in the face, and is like, you don't touch me, whatever. And then she starts sobbing. And then he brings her back in and just holds her while she just sobs. And that's the end.
Yeah.
And when I was watching that, I was like, as far as storytelling, this is what traumatized people look like.
Yeah.
Like this is a real accurate look at what, like, if I was Annie, I would have wanted to break down and sob. But also in her world, the only way that she knows how to really like value male attention is through sexual favors. And so you get this weird cultural intersection between the pair of them, combined with the trauma and their poverty strickenness. And I think it results in what this scene is, because I can definitely imagine someone like Annie having gone through a whirlwind of a day that was really traumatizing, doing exactly what she did. That makes so much sense to me.
Yeah.
The resolution of after she's done crying, what happens? I don't know. We don't get that. we don't get that, but we're not supposed to get that, because it's meant to ask a question and not give us an answer. But yeah.
Have you seen other Sean Baker films?
I don't think I have.
He did Red Rocket in 2021. The Florida Project was 2017. Did you see that one? Okay. He's interesting. I get that he's the GOAT. Like, for many people, he is just the director and everything. And this is a great film. But he leaves you on an unsettled note and just kind of calls it good. Mm-hmm. He did that in Florida Project. It was a very weird final 4 to 5 minutes of the film. And you're just kind of like, whoa, what happened? But I know that at least for him and his movies, he's trying to take so much of real life and amp it up a little bit, but keep it true to reality, that he doesn't give finite endings. He doesn't wrap up a story with a bow. He just goes, and we're done. Bye. Yeah. And I felt the same way with you. When it went to black in the theaters, I was kind of like, okay, are we going to see an epilogue? What's happening next? An odd way to end the film. A weird film that's also good.
Yeah.
And stressful. Not a cozy watch for anyone who's looking for a cozy watch.
No, not a cozy watch.
No.
I typically will gauge how stressful a movie is by how I feel like I need to just be dividing my attention by looking at my phone. Yeah. And in the middle of this thing, when it was really going crazy, I was like, okay, I need the phone. I need the phone in order to keep watching this, which is how I felt when watching The Bear.
Yeah. It's not a cozy one. It's interesting because it's so set in New York, but it's a different side of New York. It's Brooklyn. It's Russian. So much of it is Russian and Jewish cultural context that most of us don't know if you haven't lived there.
Yeah.
So it almost feels like it's set in like a different place, different country.
Yeah, because they're like going to these restaurants and these clubs, and they're just speaking Russian to each other. I'm like, is that real?
It's real, yeah.
Because, I'm just in little Utah full of, mostly white people. I guess Russians are white people too. But, like, I'm culturally homogenous out here. And everywhere I go, it's either English or maybe a little bit of Spanish.
That's true, yeah. You might have some Samoan or Tongan here or there, depending on where you are. In Los Angeles, there's a good amount of Russians here. I don't know if it's the same. It must be a lot more in New York, I would say. I had a Russian friend visit one time and talk about going to different areas where it's like all Russians working together and all Russian bank or all Russian this. And there are places like that in pockets here. In New York, it's much more that way. And it's weird when she goes in that restaurant or the club and they're like, do you know where he is? Do you know where he is? As if some restaurant they walked into would know where this boy was, but then they did.
How'd you feel about the performance of like Mikey Madison? Because I've seen a lot of buzz on Twitter about her from like other actors just being like, holy cow, she did an amazing job.
This is a tough one.
What if she's listening to the podcast?
Oh my gosh, are you going to do another call out like Rachel Sennett?
Because then I could take her last name and I'd just be Madison.
Oh my gosh, Madison
I mean,
Squared.
wouldn't that be fun?
That would be fun.
Hey, Mikey.
You're right.
Hey, Mikey, give me a call.
I have to say, like, a part of me is a little turned off by the whole situation. Just knowing she's going to be fetishized for the next multiple years until she's in some random movie.
Yeah.
Because she's pretty, she's speaking Russian, she does an amazing performance in this movie as the lead when we really haven't seen her in much else.
Yeah.
She was one of the side characters once upon a time in Hollywood. Again,
I didn't even know that.
Speaking, to Quentin Tarantino, his side characters have had amazing careers. Margaret Qualley, Austin Butler. I think she did great. She's destined for amazing things. I feel a little sad because I think they're going to put her on too much of a pedestal after this. And like Jennifer Lawrence and so many others before her, they're going to expect greatness every single time she shows up. And she's just going to get some scripts or some things that are not meant for her. That's going to suck. But I think she's great. How did you feel about her performance?
I thought it was good. Granted, I haven't knowingly seen her in other things. And so this is my first real exposure to her, like as in, in a lead position, lead role. So I believed her as her character. And I didn't have any like, oh, she's been miscast. I believed her as she was, she was Anora. And when I'm watching a movie like that, I wonder how much of this is in this script versus how much of it is just like they are just ad-libbing a scene that they know needs a lot of energy and a lot of tension. And I think that either way, phenomenal.
It's interesting because some writers, directors will write everything out. And so you'll think it's a lot of it ad-libbed or improv, and then you'll find out like, no. I mean, Big Lebowski, he says dude so many times, or man, and you think this is just Jeff Bridges until you find out that he says, no. Every single dude or man was written into the script. Like they had all of it down to a T. I did hear that Anora has a good amount of improv, which I think after finding Mikey Madison, who has experience with that culture, New York, all the rest of it, it probably was easier for her to draw from experience. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about, we're just going to call it out, Hollywood and audiences are horny as hell. Maybe not the younger generations, but they are horny. And I think there's a problem when a woman first hits the scene as a sex symbol or just in sex scenes that are sexy. Mm-hmm. It's a hard battle, I feel like, for them for the next step. And even when you ask people why it was so good, they're like, she's pretty, she's amazing. It's like, stop. Don't say that part. We understand that, but like, no.
Yeah, it is a weird thing. And especially, I don't know if it's just because as I've gotten older, I've just been kind of jaded by things that normally, like when I was, in my 20s, I'd been like, holy cow, right? Like I remember when Wolf of Wall Street first came out and I was like, I never want to see it because it's got the most amount of F words per minute that any movie. But then when I watched it, I was like, well, that wasn't actually that bad. Like maybe like our culture has just moved on. We're evolving to the point where like profanity and nudity just doesn't carry the same weight on screen as it used to, right? Like the one with Sharon Stone, Basic Instinct, right? Where she uncrosses her legs and flashes people and then closes it back up, right? That was a big deal.
Yeah.
Right. It was like a cultural moment, but now we're kind of awash in nudity in a way. Like the first scene in this movie, the first 30 seconds, you just see ass and tits. That's what it is from like 4 or 5 different women. And that's just how it's played. It's just played straight like that. And I'm interested in kind of our cultural relationship around nudity and whether it's a good thing or bad thing, hard to say. Right. I guess my question would be, did Mikey Madison feel like, was she taken by the script? Did she just like love, she wanted to portray the character and she was just like, yeah, I'll do anything. I'll do whatever. Or was it like, I feel like I got to do this in order to get it, to get to get ahead. Right. Because that's a really hard one. And we'll never know the answer to that question. Her refusal of an intimacy coordinator, was it for just that scene or was it for the entire movie?
It was specifically, I know, for that scene, but I would bet it's for the entire movie.
I feel like it was, at least the thing that I read made it seem like it was the entire movie that they denied an intimacy coordinator. And so, when I hear that, what I hear is like someone feels really confident in what they're doing and is trying to not be taken by the pressure of a role of needing to do something, right? Because I feel like if I was in granted, I am not I'm neither a hot girl nor an up and coming actress.
Okay.
But if I felt pressured into a situation, I would want some sort of safety net in there. And an intimacy coordinator would be some sort of safety net versus by denying the safety net, you're like, no, I'm actually fully in control here and I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but it'd be certainly interesting to chat with that intimacy coordinator about this and also about Hollywood's approach to like nudity now.
Yeah, we're definitely. I've saved the article from Variety. We're going to talk about it. Another show that's kind of important for intimacy coordinators was Normal People, which we'll talk about down the road.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, one of the biggest
Huh.
shows and biggest productions that use them all the way through.
Oh, did they?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. So we're gonna have the
that
guy's
show
name
was
is.
devastating.
It was devastating. We have to rewatch it just for that episode. The guy's name is Yehuda, so we're gonna have Yehuda on hopefully soon, maybe the next month or so, and then we'll talk about this again. We'll bring Nora back up, whether it has won awards or not. And you rented Anora?
Yeah. I
Okay.
think I just got it on Google.
Got it on Google. I know it's also on Apple TV Plus, or I mean Apple TV or Fandango and otherwise, so I'll have that linked in
Hmm.
the show notes. Speaking of another movie that was just the Oscars, did you see The Substance?
No, that's another one that's gotten a lot of buzz on social media.
It's gotten a lot of buzz for good reason. We don't, in general, both of us don't do well with horror. This is not
Yeah.
horror, but it is body horror.
Yeah.
I was so not excited for this movie and did not want to see it. But then with Demi Moore winning the Golden Globe for Best Actress, and her speech was obviously award show political of saying, "Oh, I've never won this. It'd be so great to prove that popcorn actresses can win awards." Dot dot
Hmm.
dot. So, of course, if you're listening, you already know who won, but we'll see. And I hope that she did win the Oscar. This is a wild movie. The director, I'm gonna butcher the name, but I'm gonna try my best. Coralie Fargeot, Fargeat, and she's French. I'm not going to say it phonetically English because I think it's Fargeau. Um, so Coralie Fargeau is a very interesting director and writer, and she just took a very weird turn for this movie. She's done a couple other things, nothing most Americans will have seen: Reality Plus, Revenge, Le Telegram. We're not going to have seen any of that stuff. This is only her sixth movie she's directed. At least it's been on IMDb, so maybe some short
Wow.
films before that. Hails from Paris, and it shows the entire way through. When I did my master's over in London, I had a French student in my class, and I was like, "I'm from Los Angeles, Hollywood. This is where we make movies." And she was like, "No, no, France. That's where you make movies." And we got into a little bit about French film, and I was just like, "Why is it all so fucking weird?" And she was like, "That's the point. It makes you think." This movie is a weird game of making you think, but also making you not want to think about it because it's so incredibly gross. Do you
Hmm.
know the premise of this movie at all?
No, I mean, other than it's about like needing to look good.
I'll start with the IMDb synopsis because that's the one they give us. A fading celebrity takes a black market drug, which is a cell replicating substance that temporarily creates a younger, better version of herself. I'm going to try to keep it semi spoiler free for all those who are trying to watch, but I'm going to spoil a few things that I don't think are too major. So, Demi Moore is a dancer, has her own morning show. Dennis Quaid is the absolutely gross TV executive who's in charge of it. And she just realizes everyone around her, especially the execs, are like, she's too old. She's too
Mm.
old. You got to get her off the air. We got to get someone younger. So she runs into this random guy who's like, hey, you would be the perfect candidate for this new trial drug. And the whole movie is like very obvious and then subversive at the same time. She goes down back alleys to go get this drug, and the whole story is about women, their perception, how we don't allow them to be older, and what we see, especially in entertainment, is they get fired, they get let go, they don't get parts. And so it's a critique of that in the grossest of ways. So she takes this drug, and you'll see from the trailer, out of her back that splits in half, Margaret Qualley crawls out. And
Oh,
it's gross. When I'm saying gross, grotesque, the Thing level, best special effects. It's absolutely disgusting to watch, and they don't cut away.
huh.
So first, her retina's split within her eye. Then one of them crawls back behind the eye as she's writhing in pain, and then you just see all these different things like pushing out of her back, and then right down the spine splits, and out crawls wet Margaret Qualley. and then she has to sew up Demi Moore's back, and you watch the whole thing, and it's so disgusting. So the quick premise, because we're just going to show you the rules of the game. The new version gets to be alive or awake and take the light for a few days, 5 to 7 days. Then you have to switch. And so the question is, if you've done all these things to make yourself look young and be young, how do you still live with you as the older self, and how do those two things balance? And of course it
Wow.
has to go off kilter, and that's when the real body horror takes over to a crazy extent. So Margaret Qualley gets the new job. She takes over for Demi Moore in the morning show. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, she's so hot. It's extremely overt in its critique of gross men, bringing in all the
Mm-hmm.
executives. And they're like talking about her butt and just how it jiggles. It's gross.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently the director, Coralie, says this is things she heard on set all of her years working. And so this is not coming from nowhere. This is what I know, and this is what other actresses have told me from their own experiences. So it's very real to a gross extent, but it just turns for the worst and it really just pulls out all the stops and goes, you thought that was gross? Here we go. So at
Mm-hmm.
many moments, my partner would just close her eyes and I would narrate what was going on. And it was gross because I had to watch it. So I'm turning the volume down, like, what just came out of her leg? Oh.
Okay. Wow.
So by the end of it, it's just absolutely disgusting. It doesn't end on like a clean little happy note. But even though it makes you feel so sick, the purpose of the movie is so clear and strong. That part's a saving grace. It's just for those with weak stomachs or who don't do well with body horror. Watch the YouTube recap. Don't watch this. It's a little too hard. I'm glad I saw it for the sake of the awards show and the
Yeah.
conversation, but it was hard. It was hard to watch.
Huh. I don't know if that intrigues me more or pushes me away.
If you had your phone out and you didn't get to watch, you just got to see
Yeah.
it in the background during the gross scenes, you
Yeah.
could do it. I think it is important because we do treat women in such a different way than men,
Yeah.
and they do age gracefully. And we have so many fantastic actresses that are in that age range that maybe Hollywood doesn't treat the best,
Mhm.
from 45 plus, who are some of the best actors in the world right now. And so it does hit on that quite a bit. And even for Demi Moore, it's a lot of it like her story. She was the sex icon. And as that
Mhm.
started to not fade, but be too familiar and be a little old, or she got a couple wrinkles, executives cut her out of a lot of stuff and saying, oh, you're just too old to appear in this. You're not the young,
Mhm.
hot thing. So it does good for the conversation. But the French desire to gross you out is not in my blood. It's on movie. Universal's fumbled the bag. They had paid for this movie and they'd bought the rights. They saw the first couple test screenings and said, no one's going to watch this. It's too gross. And so they finally sold the rights off. They sold them to Mubi, which is the streaming service that just has other film festival films, small films, foreign films.
Mhm.
Mubi has made a killing on this because you have to sign up to watch it. And they
Oh,
but regardless, you can watch with a 7-day free trial on Mubi. Make sure you cancel if you don't want to keep watching. But they have a lot of other good movies. So this is how I get started on Mubi. Great move by them because even beyond the Oscar talk, it is a good movie, and anyone who can stomach the body horror is going to love it.
interesting.
Substance on
Cool.
Mubi. Take us through your next thing you've been watching.
I've been watching Shrinking season 2. A little late to the game. I think I watched the first 3 episodes before it ever came out with the screener
Yeah.
account, and then just stopped.
Okay.
And I think for a number of reasons, I like Jason Segel. Forgetting Sarah Marshall, hilarious.
Yeah.
Beautiful movie. But there's just something about this show that rings of like, this is just middle class white people who have no financial problems, just kind of like being cute and quaint and weird with their problems.
Yeah.
And like, so here are some of my critiques. I'll lead with critiques and then I'll follow up with like things that I really like. Um, yeah, so that's what I'll lead with is like, this is basically like the black people aren't really even like black.
No.
They're more white characters. This
Yeah.
is the same problem of Winston in New Girl. Like he might be black, but his blackness was never part of his characterization,
Yeah.
which there's probably a conversation there worth having about whether or not a black character needs that blackness part of their characterization. But they also like rarely seem to work. And they live these really upper middle class lives with these beautiful homes somewhere in sunshiny California. And
Yeah.
you're just like, how is any of this happening? I know
Yeah.
therapists. Like I dated a therapist. They make good money, but not this good of money, right? Like
No.
unless they're getting paid $300 an hour, which I don't know, maybe they are. but that's an
Doubt it.
insane rate for therapy, especially when like some of them are court ordered to be there,
Yeah.
and like of course they're not paying $300 an hour. So like I'm just like I don't understand some of the internal logic of the show, uh, of just like how they. So did you watch the show?
I think all of season 1, and I got 3 or
Yeah.
4 into season 2.
Yeah, they just like so cutely and quaintly show up in each other's lives,
Yeah.
and I'm just like,
The
do none
neighbors,
of you
I'm like,
work? Like,
why?
how do you know where each other are all the time? You just keep meet cuting with each other in the real world all the time. I'm just like, get a life.
Yeah.
Please involve yourself with someone different than the main cast. And so it falls into that territory for me where, the last couple of seasons of Parks and Rec, I thought it was too cutesy. They wrapped everything up just a little too cutesy, a little too shiny, a little too like warm and sunsetty. And I'm like, this isn't real. This is straining my credibility meter or whatever.
Yeah.
And so on some level, the show does that for me. What I like about it, mainstreaming the conversations about therapy, showing that therapy is good, it's helpful. I think that's already kind of been done in our generation and like lower. Like how many girls profiles on like Tinder and stuff that I see where they're like, if you're not in therapy, I'm not going to talk to you.
Yeah.
So it's pretty mainstreamed at this point in our generations, but I know for older generations, it hasn't been. It's still like kind of looked down on to like, oh, you need therapy? That's weak. And so like, I like this about the show. I also happen to be a fan of not just therapy, but the way therapists think and the way therapists approach personal problems, because it is with so much more generosity and compassion, and their ability to reframe things is amazing. And I think that the more exposure any of us can have to that way of approaching our own lives and our own problems is good. It's good, right? Also, some of the characters are just fun, like I love Jessica Williams. She's so funny. I love her in almost everything she shows up in. I love her outfits. I want to wear her outfits. She had some kind of like colorful jumpsuit. And I'm like, do I need to get a jumpsuit? I mean, that's what I thought when I saw Benson Boone at the Grammys doing a front flip off of a piano in a spangly blue jumper. And I'm just like, I think I need to get a glittery jumpsuit so that I can do front flips off pianos.
Yep.
It's also a really emotional story. And while my critique of it being a little too like warm and sunshiny and cutesy is fair, I think that its ability to be honest about its main characters and their grieving processes and the things that their grief and their trauma make them do is honest and it's real. I think it wraps things up a little too cute with a bow sometimes on these characters. Like one character will cheat on her husband, kind of, and then it's resolved by the end of the next episode. And you're just like, but wait, like that, I didn't feel like they earned. I liked the character flow through the whole thing, but it was only like an episode. I feel like it should have been more than that. And I'm not done with season 2 yet. And so I've got a few episodes left. The jokes are funny. Sometimes they're a little too funny where you're like, oh, this is just cutesy like screenwriting where you're doing the formulaic joke creation and they didn't like massage it enough to make it feel like a real conversation instead of just like, oh, you're getting Harrison Ford to say something quippy because Harrison Ford needs to say something quippy in this moment to make it a comedy. And so there's sometimes there where I feel like the dialogue struggles a little bit, but like also, hell, I want to live that life. I want to live the life of the upper middle class who hardly works, who just stands around, drinks wine, and runs into their friends all the time and just yaps about their cute little quaint little issues. And not all of them are cute little quaint little issues. One of them is like severely traumatized from going overseas and being in the military. Two of them, one of them, his wife died, and their mom died, and so they're always dealing with that and stuff. Yeah. And so there's some really big trauma things that they're working through. I would recommend the show. It's funny, it's cute, it's warm. It'll make you feel good at the end of it. 35-minute episodes, so not anything that you got to commit a huge amount to. Sometimes it's a little cute and quaint and cutesy in ways that I think strain credulity, but that's okay because it's a TV comedy. It's not supposed to be like Requiem for a Dream or something.
Did you watch Ted Lasso?
Yes, exactly the same as Ted Lasso.
Yeah, because some of the writers. In fact, I think this speaks to how rough season 4 of Ted Lasso was. Yeah, the writers from Ted Lasso came over to write this. So Brett Goldstein, of course, is heading up the writers' room. But I think it has an issue that I've continually seen in the last few years with these streaming shows, which is that because studios are not paying for writers' rooms to be what they used to be, which changed, of course, before the strike and during the strike, but A writer's room, you'd sit down 6 months before, and it'd be 6 or 7 months long, sometimes longer, in which these people sat down and said, we're going to break a story in this first week, and then we're
Mhm.
all going to start writing our scripts and checking with each other, making sure everything is paid off and get it done.
Mhm.
Now it's maybe a month, maybe two. And these
Gee,
people are working on things, but the writer's room itself being organized and pulled together is very short for a lot of shows.
mhm.
And so it feels like with this and with Ted Lasso, among so many other shows, these people are writing their own scripts, not checking at all what's happening between the episodes or how they can carry this
Mhm.
over into your episode. They're not writing about it, they're not interested in it. And it just feels a little sloppy at times, which maybe you're seeing with some of these, yeah, cheating scandals wrapped up in one episode.
Yeah.
But no, it's a good show.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, the comparison to Ted Lasso is apt because, like, Ted Lasso, another great comedy show that, in my opinion, just like was a little too cutesy sometimes, a little too quaint, a little too just like, oh, there's Ted Lasso being Ted Lasso again. And it didn't feel grounded. It
Yeah.
didn't have like a groundedness to it that maybe not everything needs to be grounded and have a gritty feel. I'm not looking for grit like a Zack Snyder sort of grit, but like just a level of groundedness, of realness to let the story feel like it's real, like these are real people. Because when I'm watching it, I'm just like, so this is kind of a fairy tale.
Yeah.
And maybe it's supposed to be a fairy tale, but it certainly has that feel to it of like, this is not how real people in the real world act.
Someone broke Ted Lasso for me recently. I didn't realize Ted Lasso was the Wizard of Oz. Did you know that?
Oh, I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, him coming from Kansas, the cowardly lion being the
Yeah.
trainer. Anyways, there is a level of supernatural positivity to it all.
Hmm.
I know that's what turns a lot of people off. When I was really into Ted Lasso, probably season two, I was like, "Oh my gosh, have you not watched? You have to watch Ted Lasso." And I'd have people talk to me later, being like, "No one's that happy. No one's that positive." It's a Disney level of fake smile, and I was like, "Okay, for the cynical folks out there, it's really a terrible show." But
Yeah.
even for those who are a little left of positive, I understand how it's a little hard to watch. At least for me, Shrinking season two, why I paused, it was a little hard to watch for that, and it's just so unbelievable at times. I will go back to finish because I've heard it's great and it wraps up great, but it is a lot of, like you said, no one has real jobs or schedules. They all show up fairy tale reality, like you're saying. So,
Yeah. Which, I mean, I guess if you go into it, think of just knowing that that's what it is, then maybe you can kind of inoculate yourself against some of the willing suspension of disbelief. Because I am not a cynical person, and I wouldn't
yeah,
even lean into the cynical spectrum. I would feel like I'm a very upbeat and positive guy, but even then, like this, it strains reality by being so sunshiny that it is fantasy.
yeah,
And yeah, and that might just be a personal flavor profile of me and the stories that I see. If it's going to be fantasy, be a fantasy.
yeah.
But if it's going to pretend like it exists in the real world, I want it to be a little bit more real.
My partner's been watching Gilmore Girls for the umpteen thousandth
Talk
time.
about another fantasy.
And I'm watching it and I was like, this is fantastical. Yeah. Her
Yeah.
at the Harvard, the paper, I'm like, what does Lorelai even do? Just
Yeah.
how people fill their days. I'm like, this is wild. It just feels like someone who's never lived in a working world, writing about a working world, which I understand from big
Yeah.
screenwriters is the case. At a restaurant, they worked here, they're writing shows, and they're like, this is how a 40-hour work week looks. Or a 40-hour work week is so boring, I couldn't imagine writing about it that way. Get it? But it definitely hurt as a child turning into an adult to be like, wait, you sit at one desk for 8 hours or nine if you have lunch?
Yeah.
What? It's a wake
Yeah.
up call. Wake up call indeed.
Yeah. Anyway, so I recommend it.
All right, Shrinking season two on Apple TV Plus. Let's take another fantastical reality turn for our final show. We'll talk about. Have you watched the documentary on Netflix with Brian Johnson?
Oh no, I know what you're talking
Oh boy.
about. We have a special connection to this one.
We sure do. My fiance loves the idea of what Brian Johnson's doing and just like the aura of the cultish man that he is.
Yeah.
So the documentary is called Don't Die, The Man Who Wants to Live Forever. It's on Netflix, directed by Chris Smith, starring Brian Johnson. It's interesting because Chris Smith has done Tiger King. He was a producer on Tiger King. He directed episodes of Fire, the Fire Festival show. He
Oh.
directed this documentary called Jim and Andy about Jim Carrey doing the Andy Kaufman movie Man on the Moon.
Yeah.
I love all of these, so I was like, oh, here we go. It's interesting watching this though because he balances respect and adoration for what Brian Johnson's doing with absolute scrutiny pretty well. And I think that there's more respect and adoration for Brian Johnson through more of the film than there is scrutiny. But there's enough for you to recognize, oh, he doesn't want to piss this guy off, but he has to say what he has to say. The
Yeah.
biggest one being, for all those who don't know, Brian Johnson is a modern day Count Dracula. No, Brian Johnson is
Basically.
trying to live forever. And that has been his whole push for the better part of 10 plus years. He was a tech CEO. He sold his business to PayPal, or he built Venmo, made a ton of money that way, and then was like, I've got more money than I know how to spend in a lifetime. So therefore, I'm going to extend my lifetime three, four, five, six-fold. And he's really working to reverse his aging process so he can live 100 plus, 200 plus years. And recently, he's wrapped in his son in the last few years to aid him in this. So watching it is hard because at some moments you're like, wow, human achievement peak. He's taking his son's blood infusions, once a week or whatever. He's doing all these different things, red light masks, waking up at 4 a.m., taking these different supplements. He has like 56 pills a day or something crazy. It's out of control. The way he eats is crazy. He's done by 11 a.m., doesn't eat till the next morning at 4 a.m. All these things he does. He lives in Venice, California. I recognize where he was around. Huge, massive house with just walls of trees and walls to protect him from the entire outside world. So it feels like a fairy tale. This is your fairy tale, like
Yeah.
Shrinking Season 2. He's living a life that is fake because he has the money to do so. But the big scrutiny, and I'm so glad they pulled it out in the doc, is with all this money he has, if he wants true human progress, he would pay and fund studies to have much
Yeah.
bigger sample sizes. Prove that what you're doing can be done wholesale. It's not just you, and he won't do that. So it's just him. And then, of course, he started an olive oil company and he started a supplement company and he's shilling and selling everything he can.
Hmm.
Every other video, he's got an influencer in there. They're paying just to work out with him at his house to prove they're like with the guy who's going to live forever. It's very odd, but a big part of it is his Mormonness. You have to watch it so we can discuss that.
Really? Does it come out?
It comes out for a good 10 plus minutes or so.
Really?
He went on a mission about his parents. His dad, I forget what he was doing, sales or otherwise, but he had a bender and was doing coke and stuff like that and left his wife. And so Brian went to live with his dad and then what that meant. And Brian was still going to church and Brian went on a mission. And then Brian had his own family, was Mormon, had kids in the church. And he specifically talks about all these different pressures that being part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints
Hmm.
put on him and how that led to him fully breaking while working at a company he sold to PayPal and then cutting ties and being done with the church forever.
Hmm.
And then his son talks about how because his dad is no longer in church, he had to shun him and cut contact and all these different things that
Oh
we
boy.
may kind of know about and we had different
Yeah.
experiences with. But weird to see this high profile guy talk about it in that way.
Yeah.
But his love for his son is odd. Have you seen his videos before?
Uh, no, but like it feels ethically dubious to be using your own son as a blood bag to support your own fantasies of immortality. Like that's as much as I know. And
Yeah.
dude, that is weird. Like, does your son have any real agency in this thing? Like, it just
Here's
feels ethically dubious. Like his son's gonna be taken into therapy.
his son's 19 years old, right? His son's 19 years old. So his son, Talmadge Johnson, is going to University of Chicago. So use Chicago. So
What
he's going to be,
Mormon name?
you know,
Talmadge Johnson. I feel like I knew 10 of them.
looking at the reviews and the comments, everyone's like, what kind of a name is Talmadge? And I was like, you just don't know. You just
You
don't
don't get
know.
it. You didn't grow up in Provo, Utah, did you?
If you know what ZCMI was
Yeah.
or Hoagie Yogi, then you would know who Talmadge Johnson was. I don't want to belittle Brian Johnson and his quest because for those who are fully disconnected, you have a guinea pig who's rich as hell who is just going to find out if you really can live forever or what this does.
Hmm.
But Talmadge is 19, and you would think in Brian's head it would click that him going on a mission and feeling like he made a mistake at 19 means he shouldn't enroll his son in this at 19 and younger to be his blood bank. Your frontal lobe is not developed.
Yeah.
So it's a little gross that Brian at multiple times on camera is like, man, I just want to be like Talmadge. I just wish I had his body. I wish. And you're like, this is kind of creepy, actually. This is not like just admiration or adoration. It's like an obsession. It's an envy of youth and just wishing you could have his body. But I think because of Brian's mormanity and problems there and his panic attacks during his job, I think he actually wishes he was just in Talmadge's body, going to college, working out, partying, drinking, that he's not able to do now. So I left feeling stuck in the middle. I would love to see what happens, for sure, like everybody else. I also hate that he's going to live forever because he's super rich. And
I don't know. I think time comes for us all. I think his is a failing project.
You know what kills me? Word choice. He could be hit by a car walking across the street, and it's all for naught, right?
Yeah, and it's all for naught. And he could just be living. He could be living his life right now and like living a life.
He could. You should watch at least just the beginning part of the documentary, showing his day-to-day process, waking up at 4 a.m. and stuff. He literally just lives to live. He goes through his entire day, takes some calls for his business and like podcast and whatever else. But literally, the first 8 to 11 hours of his day is just maintaining his body and trying to become younger than he is.
Oh my gosh.
That, to me, is a wild way to live. It shows a lack of peace with who you are and the acceptance of death.
I want to look at this through a Jungian lens of like, oh, he is so afraid of death that he's actually creating a kind of living death right now where he's not actually living. He's just a body that he's trying to take care of and keep alive for as long as possible. That's no life.
Hence why I said it's kind of like Count Dracula.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the dude, he looks like Dracula. He's pale. He's weird, like a little too pale.
And I will say this, in the documentary, they pulled out sound bites like we're making right now about him and put it in there. Podcasters, YouTubers, it showed all of them, completely calling him out. So that's why I want to say he's a human being who is trying to do something, and he has a very complicated relationship with himself and with death and with life. Yeah. He still has Mormon trauma, and it shows when he talks about it. And I'm sitting there like, get into a better therapist's office, you know?
Yeah, truly. Like, once a Mormon, always a Mormon in some sense, because even if you leave the institution, the way that you engage with the world, unless you do some really hard work, will always be in a Mormon way. And what a Mormon thing to do than to visit your own traumas upon your kids. The sins of the fathers are visited upon the heads of the children.
Also, we're going to just call a spade a spade. Cult members make fantastic cult leaders. I'd say the best.
Yeah.
And he has created a cult of other people. He has this company. He goes worldwide to different areas to go speak and bring more people into this, and people are buying into it like a cult. They are loving it. They are contributing. They're buying his products that are oftentimes just a sham from what people have talked about in the doc. So he kind of left Mormonism to become his own Joe Smith, and this Joe Smith is all about living forever.
Wow.
And it's just a little sad because, like you're saying, I think he's missing out on what the purpose of life is by trying to extend it.
Yeah. Huh.
So watch it or don't. It's only an hour and a half long. You're going to feel weird afterwards. You're going to do a deep dive. You're going to look at way too much stuff. You're going to see the photos of him when he was at that company, and you're going to be like, that guy wanted to live forever? That guy visits the Denny's on a weekend with his family because that's how he enjoys himself. That guy is not future-proof, and it's very odd to watch a transformation.
Wow. Cool. Well, I got a spare 90 minutes.
Don't Die, The Man Who Wants to Live Forever on Netflix.
Nice.
We won't keep everyone. Let's wrap it up there for today. We will be back again next week as we have one of our interviews. And then in 2 weeks, we've got our next Sacred Text series where we are going to be watching, drumroll please, Sing Street and Princess Mononoke.
Sick. I'm so excited.
So everyone give those a watch if you'd like to before we get there. Until then, watch good movies and TV and don't try and live forever.